You might not think that Johnny Depp and Donald Trump have much in common besides being hard to look at. But Depp's defamation case against his ex-wife Amber Heard in 2022 was an early sign of trouble for the 2024 presidential election. I'm Amanda Marcotte. Welcome to Standing Room Only. Happy Pride! How are folks celebrating? I am so lucky. I got to DJ a street festival over the weekend. I love doing Pride events. You don't get drunk old men coming up to you demanding that you play the oldies. Plus, drag queens. Unfortunately, we're not here to talk about gay stuff as much as I would like to. We're here to talk about my people, the straight people. And unfortunately, our culture is deeply messed up. This month is the third anniversary of a deep heterosexual disgrace, Johnny Depp winning his defamation lawsuit against his ex-wife, Amber Heard. Why bring this up now? Well, 2 years after Depp won his lawsuit against Heard, Donald Trump was elected president. And I think the Depp case was a sign of what was coming. It was an indicator of rising misogyny and the backlash to the MeToo movement. But we'll get back to that in a moment. I want to remind everybody that this started in 2018 at the height of the MeToo movement. Heard had written an op-ed where she described herself as a public figure representing domestic abuse. She hadn't named Johnny Depp, but he sued her anyway. The case ended up being tried in the court of public opinion, where this preposterous story that Johnny Depp was the real victim took hold. This was not entirely organic, to be clear. Depp had hired a publicist named Melissa Nathan, who famously said that she could bury anyone. She went on to seed social media with misogynist rumors about Heard, who had been 25 when she met the 48-year-old Johnny Depp. The strategy, according to the New York Times, is waging a largely undetectable smear campaign, which you know is succeeding when online criticism skyrockets. This is the same publicist hired by director Justin Baldoni when he wanted to run a smear campaign against actress Blake Lively. Luckily, that got exposed by the New York Times before it got too far, and now Baldoni's lawsuit has been dismissed from court. It's not clear how much the pro-Depp clamor online was seeded by hired guns, but honestly, they were pushing on an open door. My guest on Pass the Mic later in the show is Kat Tenbarge. She reported for it at the time for NBC News, and she found that content creators on TikTok and YouTube found that attacking Amber Heard was like printing money. They didn't even know who Amber Heard was, but they were like, blonde lady cries, hater. There was an immense amount of public hunger in 2022 to forget all the lessons of the Me Too movement. People want to fall back on this comfortable belief that sexism isn't real, women are lying, and it's accused men who are the real victims here. It's that energy that led to a misogynist like Trump winning the election 2 years later.
And my people told me about 4 weeks ago, I was saying, no, I want to protect the people. I want to protect the women of our country. I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not. I'm going to protect them.
There are so many examples of why Depp's case was terrible, but I really want to focus on something really important here. Depp blamed Heard because he lost his job playing Captain Jack Sparrow in 2018 for the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. I would like to invite our producers to provide a side-by-side comparison of how Depp looked in 2003 when he was first hired to play Sparrow versus how he looked in 2018 when he was let go. That's a hard 15 years there. He looks like he got run over by the cocaine bus. He really does look like the bloated corpse of Keith Richards, and I feel bad because Keith Richards is still alive. I wish Hollywood cared more about women's well-being than they do about money, but let's be honest here. A Disney executive testified under oath, and she denied that Heard's op-ed had anything to do with Depp being fired. Multiple reports said that his erratic behavior and substance abuse were issues on set. I'm gonna guess that he was more trouble than he was worth, and that had more to do with his firing than a marriage that had ended 2 years before. Anyway, a judge in England had already ruled that Heard's allegations against Depp were substantially true. Jurors saw evidence that Depp told Heard, "You don't exist," and calling her a worthless hooker. He said he wanted to kill her and have sex with her corpse. He wrote, "Easy Amber," in blood on a mirror. But hey, The internet was flooded with rumors that Heard is a liar, so what's a jury to do? Which brings me back to Donald Trump. The outpouring of support for Depp shows that there was a lot of eagerness to choose self-delusion over facing hard truths. That's what Trump offers people, this fantasy where white people are the oppressed ones, men are the real victims, sexism isn't real, and racism isn't real.
Well, I say that it's a very scary time for young men in America when you can be guilty of something that you may not be guilty of.
It's simpler to believe that ours is a just system, even though men still hold the lion's share of money and power.
Doing a live today because obviously there is a congratulations in order for Johnny Depp for prevailing in his defamation trial against Amber Heard. But more importantly, there is a congratulations in order to all of the women like me who for the last, 4 years, have stood up to all of the attacks for refusing to back the MeToo movement.
It's just easier to believe that women are lying because the truth has a lot of implications that people don't want to think about. They don't want to think about all the things we would have to change to make our system more just and fair. And frankly, a lot of people are petty. They would rather silence women than have to watch Pirates of the Caribbean with the knowledge that Johnny Depp sucks in real life. People, especially men, want to believe that misogyny is something women make up to get attention. What's harsh in a lot of men's vibe is women claiming the right to be equal and demanding the right to be safe from male violence. So people vote for Trump, they support Johnny Depp, and they want to bury their heads in the sand. The 2024 election saw a huge swing to the right with male voters, especially those 18 to 29. In 2020, 55% of men that age voted for Joe Biden. In 2024, only 46% voted for Kamala Harris. That's a big reason why Trump won, even though he had already been found liable for sexual assaults in a civil court. I'll be talking about that more in Pass the Mic with my guest, Kat Tenbarge. The far-right website, The Daily Wire, spent a lot of money promoting anti-Heard propaganda during the trial. At the time, it confused a lot of people because they're a political website. This is not a partisan issue. This is celebrity gossip. But they understood that the Depp versus Heard trial was helping Republicans, especially Trump, and they turned out to be right. We're seeing the same thing again with Justin Baldoni versus Blake Lively. Even though Baldoni's lawsuit got thrown out in court, online influencers are still out there raking in views and making money by defending Baldoni and rooting for Lively's downfall. This entire circus is useful for convincing people to choose disinformation and ignore the truth, especially when the facts make you feel bad. Self-delusion takes practice. Defending Depp was the boot camp for the real test, supporting the idea that Donald Trump would make a fine president. My guest today for Pass the Mic is Kat Tenbarge. She is an independent journalist who works for Spitfire News and has a newsletter and has told me that she continues to be obsessed with the Amber Heard Johnny Depp story despite years of being the foremost expert on this.
That is a compliment.
No, I really appreciate that you're bringing this energy to it. You were saying something on Blue Sky the other day that I found really profound, which was that conservative pundits are really getting good at using cases like the Depp Heard case and now the Justin Baldoni Blake Lively case to radicalize people to the right who might otherwise even be left-leaning. Mm-hmm. So can you kind of explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, Candace Owens is a really good example of this because this is literally her mission statement that she has made publicly, that she sees pop culture as almost like a gateway drug into radicalizing anyone, apolitical people, left-leaning people, people who are kind of politically neutral or feel politically homeless, into this right-wing belief system. And you can see that progression through her videos and how she talks about these cases. She's not the first person to do it, but it's like if you can believe that Amber Heard and Blake Lively are making up these allegations and that they can benefit from that in some way, this is like the inverse logic of the MeToo movement. So if you can be sort of radicalized into believing that the MeToo movement was actually flipped on its head and it's women who are in power and men who are the victims, that in itself is a conspiratorial worldview. And so now you're primed for other conspiratorial worldviews. And sometimes it's as simple as being like, I never would have agreed with Candace Owens, but she's right about this, so what else could she be right about?
That's so fascinating because she goes on camera, she looks you in the eye, and she says, here's how I'm manipulating you. Mm-hmm. And yet people are like, okay.
Yeah.
And they go along with it. Why are they not stopping and going, she told us that she's manipulating us?
I think that there's just something compelling about this sort of authoritative inside baseball stance that these conservative figures take, because Chris Rufo does the same thing. He goes on Twitter and he's like, we're going to ideologically capture this issue. We're going to like smear the Harvard president. We're going to take the left's allegations and we're going to flip them against the left. And I think people on a surface level are just kind of compelled by this like very authoritative, like I'm in the right, I have the master of this topic. Like people just kind of believe it because they're so confident and because they're so outspoken. And I think that people feel like they are in on the game when these people are spelling out their plan.
It also feels like it's like a permission thing. Like,
yes,
almost like this authoritative person is telling me that it is okay to just believe false things.
Yes.
And in a lot of ways, it's not even about like they actually maybe even necessarily believe it. It's just more, I don't want to say people are lying. I think that it's more that they just get in this mindset that like, because I want to believe stuff is actually a better reason to believe it than it's true.
I also think that it's like with the MeToo movement and with these issues around allegations that women make against men, there's this really deeply instilled sense of misogyny in our culture that people are socialized within. So it's almost like it's confirming this bias that's deep within you that you've been told for years isn't true, but now you have someone telling you, no, you were right all along. Like women are more likely to lie. And like when a woman makes an allegation against a man, it's because she has a crush on him. Like she's like Blake Lively is actually attracted to Justin Baldoni. And that's such a popular rhetoric around this case that I've heard like tons of women say, I think she was in love with him. And I find that so interesting because I'm like, what if someone said that about you?
That's so fascinating. Because like, here's the thing. You can go read the New York Times story about what happened. Mm-hmm. You can actually immerse yourself in the facts. But I think people aren't doing that.
Yes. There's always a prominent narrative that has nothing to do with the case itself. You saw this with Depp Heard, and you're seeing it with like Blake Lively and Taylor Swift is a really good example of this. And Justin Baldoni's lawyer is very clever and very savvy and knew exactly what he was doing. And this was even spelled out in the leaked PR plan, was like, bring Taylor Swift into the conversation and weaponize it against feminism. And that was in the leaked PR plan that the New York Times reported on. 6 months later, they played it out and it went over perfectly. And the deflection from the sexual harassment and retaliation allegations became Blake Lively was a bad friend to Taylor Swift. Blake Lively tried to extort Taylor Swift, and now they have had this big friendship breakup. And so the story becomes like these two women are feuding instead of this woman made allegations against this man. And people love the circus of two celebrity women are feuding, even if there's no evidence for the feud, even if there's no confirmation that their friendship has fallen apart. That's the new reality that everyone is obsessed with talking about. And it's just such an excellent way to deflect from like gender violence to like catfight.
And it's become political in ways that are, I think we're seeing the ramifications like echo out, because some of the like concepts that are underlying this in this way that misogynist narratives roll out are kind of being manifest in our politics. And one of them is that women are expected to be perfect and endlessly self-sacrificing, or else they're the villain always, and in ways that are irrelevant. And it's like, you can't actually achieve that.
Yeah.
Like, whatever you may think of Blake Lively, I think that the question here is, why does a woman have to be perfect in order to deserve any human rights at all?
Yes. It's the perfect victim fallacy. It's the idea that the world is inherently just. So good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. So if something bad is happening to a woman, she must deserve it. What reasons can we find to like prove that she deserves it or that it's not happening and she's making it up and she's making a big deal out of nothing? And that is kind of the reasoning underpinning a lot of these like MeToo backlash cases, is it's this idea that she's not credible and so therefore her allegations are false and therefore she's not just not the victim, she's also the bad guy. She's victimizing the man by making these claims about him which she has no evidence and no proof for. And even though both Amber Heard and Blake Lively did bring forward evidence and did bring forward really compelling, strong evidence that a lot of victims don't even have, despite that, there's still the constant like drumbeat of they don't have any evidence, they don't have any proof. Ultimately, what this is saying is there's never going to be enough proof to meet this burden or this standard, in the same way that women are held to these expectations that are impossible to meet.
Back in the 1970s, feminists were able to get, the 70s and 80s, feminists were able to get a lot of laws passed that excluded this kind of evidence from at least rape trials. Mm-hmm. And I think judges have generally taken that as a principle where they often exclude characters like defamation that is irrelevant to the case from the courtroom. So you can't go into a courtroom and be like, Your Honor, she couldn't have been raped. She has bad hair. Or, you know, things like she slept around or whatever. But it is interesting to me how the people that want to use these tactics now just get it into the jurors' heads anyway by going on social media and seeding this stuff. Do you think that there is any way to stop that from happening?
I mean, you see sort of repeatedly in these cases. You saw it with Depp Heard and you're seeing it with Lively Baldoni, where Johnny Depp had a lawyer who was actually like taken off the case because he breached a protective order and leaked materials to YouTubers. And that didn't factor into the public discussion around the case at all. It was barely reported on, was the fact that Depp's, one of his primary lawyers and representatives was like pushed off of the case because he had breached this protective order. Right now, you have Justin Baldoni's lawyer repeatedly being warned by the judge that he could be sanctioned if he keeps using these media tactics, where he's inserting all of this unnecessary stuff onto the docket with the goal of having it enter the YouTube sphere, the TikTok sphere, the Daily Mail. He knows that like these influencers and these outlets will take all of this material that he puts on the docket and they will run with it. And that will play very heavily into the court of public opinion. And the court of public opinion has come to infringe on the actual court in ways that really undermine the justice system. In Depp Heard, the jury was not sequestered. And they aren't supposed to look at their phone. They aren't supposed to talk to people about the case.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. And also, there was no way that they were not influenced by the public discourse around the trial, because just coming out of the courtroom, they would see the crowd of supporters who were there for Johnny Depp, who were mocking Amber Heard, and they would get like news alerts on their phone about what people were saying about the case. And if you walked down the street, you would see physical indicators that Johnny Depp was winning the court of public opinion, because it's like you would go to a bar or a coffee shop and they would have a setup that's like drop coins in this one if you're team Johnny or drop coins in this one if you're team Amber. And the Johnny one would be full and the Amber one would be empty. So the way that this has been brought into the public discourse. So you can't even just
get a drink after the trial without having,
Exactly. The media ecosystem has been so captured by the biased narrative around these cases that it's impossible to avoid. And it does raise questions of if the jury is being swayed ahead of time or if you'd be able to find an unbiased jury. I don't think that in the Lively case, it's supposed to go to trial in March of next year. Already, I think the media ecosystem has been so swamped with this one-sided narrative. By the time we get to that point next year, I don't think they'll be able to find a jury that is untainted from how much this has overtaken the media ecosystem.
So I want to pivot a little bit to talk about the 2024 election, which was 2 years after Depp Heard. But as we see with the Baldoni Lively situation, we're still dealing with this kind of narrative. I think, especially with what's going on in Los Angeles and a lot of the racist rhetoric that's going on, understandably, there's been a lot of focus on the role that race played in Trump's win. But honestly, gender was a huge factor, and we see that in the way that there was this huge swing to the right, especially with younger men. What are your thoughts on how this pop culture nonsense did Trump win because of it?
I think it played a massive and understated role in Trump's success, because the sort of backlash to Me Too, similar to the backlash against the Black Lives Matter movement and the whole anti-woke space, these are often the same types of people developing the same types of rhetoric that connect back to pop culture in some way. So the people who drove the Justice for Johnny Depp movement evolved out of the space that was Gamergate, and the space that was Comicsgate, and the space that, for those who don't know, it was this sort of online backlash, this coordinated online campaign against diversity in popular media. So these are the same YouTubers who were mad that Star Wars was being a franchise that was being directed by a woman. These are the same people who were mad about Captain Marvel. These are the same people who were making it a huge deal that you had women and Black people and people of color in their Marvel movies and their Star Wars movies. And Amber Heard also was a female lead in Aquaman. This pop culture space is hugely influential in how people look at politics. It's the reason why Elon Musk and Donald Trump will post AI-generated images of themselves as Batman or of themselves in the Star Wars universe. And it's the reason why these franchises are our common cultural text that we all know. We can all draw from these stories. It's also the reason why young people will often compare what's happening in the US to the Hunger Games, because they all know the Hunger Games. We all are familiar with these franchises. And so that becomes part of our cultural script and how we build narratives and understand the world around us. And the backlash to Me Too maps onto this as well. So one of the reasons that Johnny Depp was so popular is because he was Captain Jack Sparrow. Yeah. And you see this this divide between reality and fiction, where people were actually championing him as that character in real life. Yeah. There is this kind of lack of media literacy. But along with the popularity of these pop culture icons, you have this rhetoric that becomes very continuous. And one of the things that I always talk about when I talk about what's going on in LA, the 2024 election, all of these things, I talk about Darvo. And so what Darvo is it's a social theory that Dr. Jennifer Fried came up with in 1997 to talk about how abusers will react to any effort to hold them accountable. And Darvo stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. What this looks like is Amber Heard accused Johnny Depp of domestic abuse throughout their relationship. And he said, no, that's not true. Amber is a liar. She's not credible. And actually, she was the one who abused me. Yeah. And so this is a narrative that then becomes very difficult for people to be able to distinguish who's telling the truth and who's lying. And you saw the same rhetoric around the Me Too movement of we have to support victims and we have to condemn abusers. But with Depp Heard, they just switched who was the victim and who was the abuser. And
you're we believe victims, and he's well, I'm also a victim. Yes. And so he's stealing that narrative.
Yes. And I often encounter people, even people on the left, who are this stuff doesn't really matter. It's it's just celebrity, it's just pop culture, it's just gossip. But it matters a lot, because the script that comes out of Depp Heard becomes the cultural script that applies to everything. So it's if people were really pro Johnny Depp and they came out of that trial thinking that justice was served, they carry that belief and they carry that rhetoric into how they look at all cases of domestic violence. And they carry it into things that have nothing to do with domestic violence. It's the tenets of Darvo play out in a much greater capacity than just abuse, than just the interpersonal violence for which the term originally was formed to describe. It also plays out within much larger geopolitical scale. It's the way that Russia is positioned against Ukraine. It's the way that Israel is positioned against Gaza. It's the way that Trump is positioned against the political establishment, or the way that Elon Musk will like position himself as a member of like the working class when he's the richest person on earth.
We do like to end this on a little bit more fun of a topic just to like leave people with a better taste in their mouth. So the question I want to end with is, Disney says they're not going to reboot Pirates of the Caribbean. But if they do, and they have to recast Captain Jack Sparrow because they're not going to roll out that half-baked corpse of Johnny Depp. Who would you want to see as Captain Jack Sparrow?
Okay, I thought about this a lot because I do like that franchise, and I think that Janelle Monáe,
oh my God, that's so good,
would be my perfect cast because she is such a talented, like, multi-hyphenate, and in her recent movie roles, like in the movie Glass Onion, she's so good at playing like both dramatic and comedic. Yeah. And I think you have to have that to like bring that gravitas. And
then you could make Pirates of the Caribbean a musical.
Yes, exactly. Get Lin-Manuel Miranda in there.
Mine is Donald Glover. Now, I know that people are like, that guy's so serious and he's always doing like comedy, but he always wants to be like the cool guy in it. But I say just go back and watch the Community episodes. Yes. He can be a goofball.
Yeah.
I want to like see Donald Glover back in that energy again.
Oh, that would be so good. If you go to like Disney World or Disneyland, they have a guy who looks exactly like Johnny Depp walking around as Captain Jack Sparrow, and it's so scary to see him in public. It's like, ah! So if you were to recast, then we wouldn't have to deal with that jump scare anymore.
You're like someone handsome. Someone good looking. Come on.
Exactly.
So how can people follow your work if they want to find out more from you, Kat?
So I'm at spitfirenews.com is my newsletter. And I'm also on Blue Sky and Instagram, both at Kat Tenbarge.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And folks, don't forget to like and subscribe and stay around for Encore. We'll have this week's song recommendation for you. Hey everyone, I'm coming to you from Latchkey. That's my partner's record store in Philadelphia. And today's song recommendation for Encore is an older band, one that I love. They're called the Au Pairs. And the song is called Monogamy. Now, this is one of those kind of interesting, like, music lore things because it's not available on any of their albums. They only have 2, including Playing with a Different Sex, which is a great album, definitely worth checking out. It's from 1981. But Monogamy was only released as a John Peel session. John Peel is an interesting character. He was a DJ for the BBC for a long time, and I think he started off on pirate radio before that. Anyway, he was very well known for bringing in underground and not famous artists on his show and having them perform live. Like bands like Joy Division and the Smiths, for instance, got a huge break from their Peel sessions. And the Au Pairs are a really classic example of that. They started off in the 70s, so they were inspired by punk rock, but they were definitely a post-punk band. They had the sound of post-punk that is really iconic. If you've ever heard a band like Gang of Four, they're in that genre. Like they have very bass-driven music, very danceable, very experimental, as opposed to just the 3-chord wonders of punk rock. What's also cool about the Au Pairs is that they were super feminist. A lot of people think of feminist punk as starting with Riot Grrrl in the 90s. That's not true. The Au Pairs, this album, has songs decrying diet culture, making fun of mansplainers. And the song Monogamy, which is the recommendation of the week, is about how monogamy is oppressive to women. It's a fascinating relic from the early 80s. So yeah, check out Monogamy by the Au Pairs. It's not on record, but if you search online, you can find it. If you want more Standing Room Only episodes, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Standing Room Only started as a newsletter, and it's free to read. Click the link to subscribe. I love tips. These political battles are playing out in our local communities, your family, your school, your neighborhood. If you have a story, go ahead and drop me a line, leave it in comments, and don't forget to subscribe.